Hi all and welcome to the latest show. I hope you all enjoyed your Christmas festivities and you all got what you wanted for Christmas, not some cheap perfume or the classic unwanted socks. And Christmas, they say, is a time for family, for those of you who have them close to you, but also a time for reflection and the materialistic nature of it all whilst tolerating the family in varying ways, but it is what it is. As for the village, we celebrated the Christmas gathering together on Sunday and much fun was had by all. This is part one of the 2023 end of year review. My name's Thomas Williams. Enjoy the show. Right. Just check. Yeah. The end of year review show. Just where do you start with this year? A somewhat epic year in so many ways, and a year in which many members came together and worked together, which is unique in many ways. A year of the programmes of division collapsing in upon themselves. A year when the news, medical and society section got progressively more positive. A year when the expose part got deeper and more connected to previous shows. We added a new section this year called the mystery section, where you never quite knew what you were going to hear each week, but expected it to blow your brains out and or trigger you at the same time. Some literally mind-boggling pieces in that section this year, as we danced the spiral dance as the year went on. A year where we introduced another section into the show called the From His Story to Our Story section, as more and more of our content was coming out in the alt media and also even the mainstream media. A year where several politicians globally referenced our material without mentioning us, which is fine, because it is all about the information at the end of the day. A year when members learned to trust each other more, and some found THI member love partnerships. Last year's ending had an epic recall of a trip of several members that went to Arizona with me, who got to see things and experience a few things beyond extraordinary. But overall, that event paled into the background when I and we took 3 trips this year, all of which had a major personal purpose and a working purpose to boot. Some, but nowhere near all the details of those trips came out for safety and security reasons. But what was achieved within those trips will live long in the memory for those who were there. Now, part 1 will focus on the shows of the most listened to variety, and there have been many epic shows this year, despite there being less of the most listened to shows overall. The content of the normal shows increased rapidly, and the intensity of them. Deep ponderings, deep dot connectors, and bundles of proof and confirmations of many shows in the past. Unlike other shows, I stand behind all of my words, and there is a record for all that has been said. And those of you that have been going through the transcripts this past year speak of consistency. But they also speak of, oh my God, you told us all of this years ago, but I didn't get it. That is an important lesson for us all that we must take forward to focus on what we have been given. But it's pleasing for me now to see many who do get it. The transcripts stand as testimony of words and knowledge throughout the over 600 shows that I've done now as a show host. Now, this year marked my 10th anniversary of being a radio show host, which was celebrated with a Zoom call in July. But 10 years of being pulled apart, abused, denigrated, projected at and targeted, and all for the audacity of caring and sharing and daring to tell the truth. The man who committed radio show suicide many times by blaming us all for the issues. Although things have improved on that front since the split from the trustee, which has been immensely beneficial for the long term for THI, the members, and on a personal working level for myself. But the joy I get back for that is, as always, seeing you all improve yourselves on an inner and spiritual level. This year also saw a new show being created from July onwards called the New Blueprint for Humanity Show, and that has been very popular with the members, and we'll have more on that in part 2. A large theme of the shows this past year has been around two things. First, going from the mindset to the heart set, and secondly, going away from fear into love. And tonight I will try and recapture the memory of those extra shows we did do, and no doubt causing some re-triggers along the way. But our first must listen to show came early in January, and I warned after the March Blueprint trilogy that there may not be any more until the summer, and that is what unfolded, as the next must listen to show did not occur until we had a two-parter in June and July. But that two-parter has now extended into several more parts in classic THI style. But the first must listen to show was a humdinger, and also a shock to the system, a major ass kicker, and a warning of not paying attention, applying yourself, or developing yourself. And that show was called the THI Book of Revelations. Now, it was a shorter show and only had 4 songs, and a first for THI, as all the songs were sung by one artist, Ronnie James Dio. And the songs were Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, Children of the Grave, and The Last in Line. And they set the themes for this particular show. And it opened up with a powerful statement and said as follows: this piece could well turn out to be one of the most controversial and yet powerful pieces of a THI show. Will it bring triggers within you? Absolutely. But those are your triggers to address within yourselves and not project at me again. Yes, me. For I am just the messenger. But I asked, do you want the bigger picture truth? And then this delivers it in bucket loads. But can you handle it is the great question. And if that piece or show didn't profoundly change you and alter your course of direction and thinking, then really there is no hope for you or us. It spoke about us all learning to become adults and being personally responsible, of developing on a higher frequency and with greater purpose. It spoke of us no longer being underdeveloped children in cosmic terms and developing into a higher evolved species and races. It spoke about us changing the whole system from within if we learn to develop ourselves. The folly of worshipping fake gods, who are perpetual saviour programs and a reminder of how childlike we are by following them. And how the god or gods you think you are praying to are actually preying upon you. Now, following a deep chat with members at the time in and connected to the village, I presented certain information that largely does not go in the shows. I then asked them a question of who do you think now is the main problem on this planet? Their answer was us. I spoke about how you can't blame the 1% for 100% of the issues. No more than you can't blame 540 American politicians for a country and 330 million people being in a total mess either. We spoke about the low self-worth, self-esteem and personal value, the real epidemic and pandemic all rolled into one. And then I dropped just a tiny bombshell. And I said, here comes the controversial part for some, in particular woke people who are offended by everything. And a woke is expressing disingenuous concern for anyone you have no natural affiliation with. It is a fake concern and more illusion, and these people don't actually care for anyone bar themselves. And if that wasn't the case, the world would have been a better place, and it's blatantly not. But in the background of low self-worth, ponder on this overview fact. Why are the Africans always starving? Because that is all they feel they are worth. A fairly controversial statement. But to back it up is, the reason why is because if the millions of Africans had more self-worth, they would rise up and demand an end to their plight. Demand not only food and clean water, but roads, homes, businesses and jobs. Live Aid was near 40 years ago. Did it end the famine? No. Why? Because the people tolerated it. But they are not the only race of humanoids who tolerate poor conditions and lifestyles, are they? The yellow, brown, Hispanic and native peoples tolerate it as well. The appalling conditions many Chinese have to live in, the squalid conditions of the people of India have to live in. Vast swathes of Hispanic areas rendered as slum housing. That's not housing. They are temporary shelters, and many in the West have better garden sheds than their housing. Then you have the native reservations. Barely a house in sight and just a mass of scrubland and not a beautification in sight. Many of the Jews, Arabs and Muslims abodes, exactly the same in many regions also. And I asked the question, you know why they are all living like that? Because they tolerate it. And if you are one of those labels, deep down you know it's true, because people with a low self-worth just accept their fate and reality. And I'm sorry that I had to burst your bubbles and false boogeymen, but we have been exposing the boogeymen on the internet for a quarter of a century, and what has it changed? It hasn't changed because the people of all colours will just go along with tolerating the most awful conditions and shit thrown at them, rendering them as mere doormats for all of life's ills. It's not ill fortune either. It is because the races of colour have negative anti-life based tolerances that appear to have no limit or bottom. And I cited a recent example of Black Lives Matter. Of course they matter, except that it doesn't appear to matter that they kill large numbers of their own people. Again, a harsh and brutal fact. We spoke about the white race and went back to From His Story to Our Story parts 1 and 2 of how they tried to help and teach all the other races. And the message to the people of colours was, if you eliminate the white race, who will save you from yourselves? And then I asked people to look at the alt media. A plethora of people wanting change for everyone. And yet, look all around the alt media groups, and 95% are white. Which in overview, regardless of which label you belong to, means that only the whites seem to care about social injustice, in general terms anyway. If you're one of those 5%, then give yourself a pat on the back. But the great question is, where is the rest of them? And people can rail at that fact as well. But where is your mass evidence stating the contrary? It's just not there. And the people of colours have to raise their low self-worth and tolerance of poor living conditions and quit blaming the whites, because as the recent Avatar movie stated, Avatar 2, they were brought back in the form of the enemy. And we all know who that is. The fake Jews. Now, in the past, all peoples of colour were brought here as slaves and to defeat the white race. They are your ancestors. But the modern day man of any colour is not and should never be responsible for the people of the past. And I reminded people the Universal Council made a statement once, about 10 years ago, when I complained about conditions here, and their response was, we don't see many unhappy people or people complaining. They look content. You know what? I couldn't argue against it because it was true. Happiness is the providence of sorrow for these people. They are victimizers, running not only those programs on themselves, but each other as well. Leonardo da Vinci said there are 3 classes of people: those who see when they are shown, and those who don't see. Personally, I would add a 4th class to that: those who won't see. The non-reality people, who in terms of creation are a complete waste of a life-given vessel. Remember my statement from Cosmic Voice time of all of those who were here at the beginning are now here at the end. The great question is this the beginning of the end of the beginning, the future of the past, or the past into the future? I warned of a new reality called the metaverse, the final blurring of existence between what is real and what is illusion. You wish to know who the maker is? You. You are the maker, the creator of the creation, as your thought form through frequency and the subsequent vibration of that frequency then created the energy to produce life. And I ask you all to grasp that inside your little me limitation program minded head. You are all the maker of life. And if you can create life with a thought form, what else will you create? Or are you just too lazy to contemplate it? And we went through the lyrics of the song Children of the Grave, which was a warning to us all. doing the demon dance and adapting to the Black Sun cult and ways. And we ended the show with this piece. Perhaps it is a reminder of what has unfolded here. I said a line of a song kept coming up recently stating, "Say life is what you make it, and if you make it death, well, rest your soul away." But they are your choices. We spoke about why it is important for the coloured races to support the white race in this monumental time and epoch, and this became clear with the ending piece to that show. And I said, if not, we wish you well. Enjoy the parallel world, for thy rod and thy staff will not comfort thee. The seal of Paleador would create a build-up of chaotic energies, identity fragments within the elemental, mental and astral planes, until the fifth root race fulfilled its genetic imprint and assembled the fourth DNA strand through which these soul fragments could be released. The Paleadorian seal is something that has been inserted across the board into the planet globally. It has impacted the astral body primarily at the fourth dimensional level and impaired the nadial structure. And what that means is, through the Paleadorian activation, if there's a problem with the nadial structure or astral body, these splits are going to start to heal, because the Paleadorian activation is going to start to heal the heart complex. So these issues within the nadial structure are also going to start to heal. Now on planet Earth we have a problem with the Paleadorian seal being genetically mutated into the artificial intelligence net. That means, depending on where people are stationed, as was mentioned with the AI assimilation timeline, the inner Earth, the median Earth, in Earth and higher Earth, the people in the AI in descending pockets are going to have more problems with this Paleadorian seal being released, because it's been genetically mutated and merged into the AI programs. I think we've seen the evidence of that in the past year. Now, a part of the Paleadorian seal mutation is what keeps the 666, what's known as a 666 seal, or the timekeeper running in the body. That means a 666 timeline. Now, there is something called the 666 timekeeper and the sextant matrix that is related to the genetic mutation of the Paleadorian seal into the AI nets. Now, the 666 timekeeper, keeping you in time, the time matrix in essence. The now public metaverse with ChatGPT, and those people will be lost in space and time. Much of that work has been completed by members of the fifth race, but it is not for the all. It is based on your own input, effort and understanding of it. So who is doing the bulk of this work, you may ask? The Aryan and Hebrew races and their Aryan and Hebrew descendants would inherit this burden of cellular clearing. That is the white race. Those nasty Aryans you've been told about from the non-ascending Hebrew Anunnaki cult are the very ones to save you from yourself. It was they who took on the burden for the all, including the colours. White privilege? You must be joking. Cellular clearing, you say. The people of the village may connect that dot. Most humans of the present day have the fifth race coding, and many are subconsciously involved with this process of cellular clearing, integration of the emotional, mental and astral bodies. All but a few are carrying it consciously. Even fewer understand the burden imposed upon the few to carry the all. You will never find those type of people amongst the celebrities or famous some of you may follow or even worship. They are playing the role of the demigods to siphon your energy because they are parasites. But once the cellular clearing, integration of the emotional, astral and mental bodies is complete, then the assembling of the fourth DNA strand, done by fifth strand DNA beings. And that is all done in order to release the seal of Amenti and ascend. And I told you all back in January, the seal of Amenti is now in place, awaiting yours and my input into it, which then creates our trinity of the earth, the sun and Tara. The seal of Amenti, the EST. The EST not of Eastern Standard Time, of the 12 space prison macabre time matrix, but our EST of Eastern Special Transit of no time, matrix or otherwise, and the 12 plus 1 macabre that opens the true tree of life. Work on that is progressing, and this could be a key year. Updates will be forthcoming when safe to do so, it was said in January, and the final song was a reminder it is down to us all. Think wisely. Is this a game changer? I wonder how many over the course of the year realised the importance of that show, or the warning within it. The last in line. The next must listen to show was called Angels, Demons, Codes and Lines Part 1. And this show was created by my first flight since my flying ban ended in late April, and a trip to be with a THI member that month with two main purposes: love and work on a higher level. Now, sadly for me personally, only the latter transpired, despite my efforts. But in overview, where I operate, the work is the important aspect of it. And to that end, it was very successful. I was helped enormously by the THI member, I might add, and extraordinary things unfolded in Johannesburg, South Africa. The work aspect entailed one item, but as with all my trips, other things just unfolded. I have no idea how that happens. I just sit here by my desk smoking cigars all day, but there you go. Strange happenings, deep ponderings and visions came forth in that brief but highly pleasurable stay there. Everything was flowing and deep revelations came forth with the support of our member. I practically wrote the bulk of this show in one evening as the thoughts were coming through, like reading or scanning a book. The partner kept me in supply of coffee and cigars, and I just kept writing. But the first revelation after watching the Dan Brown movie was about the Rose Line. The question was, does it go all the way through to Johannesburg? Is that why I'm here? Turns out it does. But the next question following finding out the line does not go through the Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland was, does the line go through the northern continent we now know was called the Aryan? And that was also in the affirmative. The next pondering was, does the line go all the way round? Yes, again. The next pondering was in relation to a timeline. Yes, it is. Called the Greenwich Mean Time or the Greenwich Mean Time, which is where the world clock is based upon. But we found out that this line was selected by elites based upon trade and not the passage of time or the line itself. The angle of that rose line is the same angle of the 11 to 5 parallel world line that we covered in the Cosmic Genetic series. We spoke about the Louvre building in Paris, France, and the glass pyramid containing the remains of Mary Magdalene. Now the Louvre is a glass-built pyramid built upon the rose line, which is said to be the path of illumination, which is the Luciferian path of endarkenment, not enlightenment. We spoke about the Occitan region, which contains Montsegur, where the real Mary Magdalene was killed by the Rome Church's knights. We did a piece on Greenwich Mean Time, or as I said, is it the Green Witch, who is mean in time? We covered the difference of the meanings of compass, from space, area, extent, circumference, to the more sinister of to surround, contain, envelop and enclose, all binding terms again. We spoke about what are the parallels, the imaginary lines that run from east to west connecting all locations on a map are known as parallels or latitudes. And given we have spoken of the parallels world or matrices, perhaps the description of such things makes things clearer. Parallel, 1540s in geometry of lines, lying in the same plane but never meeting, however far extended in either direction of planes, never meeting from para alawa besides one another. The parallel universe or world, but it says never meeting however far extended, but also beside one another, which to me means no interaction, unless they created conduits of thought to get us to manifest it into existence, into our reality. Either way, I said, that no longer applies to us. We then discussed the Arago lines, gold or brass signs placed along the path of enlightenment around the Louvre and many other places along the line. But Arago is also the symbol for the dark spot in the middle of the sun, which, if you are able to view it correctly, you are seeing the singularity point, due to the sun having a torus shape within it as well. The Arago, like the sun, is also the portal. We covered the words priory, scion, and the changes of important names from the letter E to an A. The next word play comes from the term mer, which is the French word for the sea. Meridian, Merovingians and Merkaba, to name but a few. Merchant, meaning trade, like mergers, which is heavily prevalent in terms of the off-world programs. Mermaids, Mercury, and something that they never showed us, mercy. Or perhaps they did with mercy, but we didn't see, or see, as it were. Because Mer means sea or ocean, CY is pronounced C, which is CC, which is the mirror of Isis. Sisters of Mercy perhaps now has a whole new meaning. We spoke about the distortion of things looking at life through their lenses, but a lens is a distortion as well. It is convex, which means curved. But vex means to bring trouble, distress or agitation to. Is the vex the con? Does the lens change with a C in front of it, like the timepiece, the C lock? Is the lens cleansed? But who is doing the cleansing? A lens can magnify and bring things closer, but also it can make things seem out of reach. Like objects in a rear view mirror may appear closer than they are. And we tied that in with the eye affliction mentioned in the movie Angels and Demons called scotoma, which means impaired vision and darkness. It was mentioned that the mother and child story of Jesus and Mary is actually Isis and Horus. The taken over pentacle was actually the symbol for the female Venus. Now it is a male and Lucifer, the morning star. The morning star was also a symbol of their Jesus, remember. The code or ode in the movie of O Draconian Devil is not only an anagram of Leonardo da Vinci, but a pointer to the Draconians running Rome 2,000 years ago that we mentioned in the Cosmic Genetic series. We spoke about the two versions of Mary Magdalene, her name changes and also the timeline changes. There, his story mentions the Templars, which were not around in 0 AD and beyond, but were around when Radomir and Mary Magdalene was alive and subsequently murdered in the 1000 to 1100 time period. We reported that the DNA done on the alleged skull of Mary Magdalene was of unearthly origin. Oops. We suggested that Mary Magdalene was originally in Rosalind Chapel until a suspicious event at the chapel in Scotland, which was likely a cover to then move it to the main Templar temple in London, until she was moved to the purpose-built chamber under the Louvre and on the Rose Line. We spoke about, for those new, why I say Catholic instead of Catholic, as it is a play on words. It is linked to the worship of the cat or the Sphinx, which are symbols of Ra and his consort Bastet. Little Bastet, if you ask me. And this is why there are cat memes everywhere once you see. Domesticated cats are not native to this planet and indeed have been declared an invasive alien species by zoologists. They were brought here and only in one region, Egypt. The home of the fake off-world gods, home of the Earth energy centre and heart. But not anymore, it's not. The divine masculine and feminine has now returned to this planet. It belongs to us all, not Egypt and their fake gods and lords. No more fallen man and six-pointed stars that symbolised it. No more Solomon seals and Orion overlays. Just better frequencies and the divine masculine and feminine. We took a look at the word feminine Femi and 9. 9 is the spiritual and collective advancement, as we have covered many times in our shows. But what does Femi mean? It means love me. Love the power of 9, not loops of 8 or the binary code of 10 that surrounds it. The beacon on the 9 and the true feminine shines again. Love has the power to change the all. It is part of your progress to be in and of love. We then revealed that the rose line doesn't actually go through Rosalind Chapel at all, but where it does go is the Aryan. The final revealing of part 1, we said maybe it was not the rose line at all. Maybe that was another of their overlay lines. The key is in the words ley lines. Ley meaning line of prehistoric track, alignment of natural and artificial features, 1922. And so ley lines per se were only named that since 1922, which reveals the overlay aspect. So what is the real line? Given the links to Radomir, to Arya, Mary Magdalene, maybe the real line was called the Rus line, which was taken over by the Green Witch, who was mean in time, and the Green Man, replete with his obelisks, Osiris, whose wife and child, Isis and Horus, is his story's version of Jesus and Mary, when the real ones were Radomir and Mary. But the final reveal of part 1 said it is not just the line that goes all the way round the planet, because as above, so below applies. As it turns out, the line on the ground is replicated above. We spoke of clearing the ley and Rus line and then setting the new intentions and frequencies following the Johannesburg trip to then merge spirally with the divine masculine and feminine energies. A typical mind and heart opening show that led to a second part. The next must listen to show was Angels, Demons, Codes and Lines Part 2. And this showed the great lengths they will go to cover up the original version of the Priory of Sion, despite large evidence to the contrary. And the story runs around the life of Pierre Plantard, who brought forward much evidence of the Priory, but with a potential kickback with which to eventually discredit him. And the question that arose from this, was Plantard a plant? Designed to tell the tale per se and then have it all debunked? Or was the recreation in 1956 a fake to cover up the original Priory of Sion? But then there were other documents prior to Plantard trying to recreate the chivalric order, the dossier secrets of Henry Lobineau. And their argument was that the Priory of Sion mysteries have been exhaustively debunked by journalists and scholars as France's greatest 20th century literary hoax. And yet many conspiracy theorists still persist in believing that the Priory of Sion was a millennium-old cabal concealing a religiously subversive secret. But since when have journalists and scholars been right? two of the minions that always supports the lies. It's a bit like trust the science meme. And yet again, the conspiracy theorists were right to ignore their science, others were not so fortunate. But according to their script, the Priory of Sion was formed in 1956. Yeah, right. Based upon a hill in France and not Israel. And between 1961 and 1984, Plantard's Priory of Sion claimed that it was the offshoot of a real Catholic religious order that was housed in the Abbey of Our Lady of Mount Zion, which had been founded in the Kingdom of Jerusalem during the First Crusade in 1099 and later absorbed by the Jesuits in 1617. The mistake is often made that this Abbey of Sion was the Priory of Sion, but there is a difference between an abbey and a priory, or to deflect from the original group and the name, in my opinion. Now, one of the Latin texts in the parchments was copied from the Novum Testamentum, an attempted restoration of the Vulgate by John Wordsworth and Henry White. Now, Novum Testamentum is the Greek version that was not translated in the Bible. And I reminded you all after a recent piece in a show where it detailed Jesus interfering with young boys, playing the strongman ritual whilst high on drugs. And then we said it is perhaps of little surprise it was not included in the Bible. The whole narrative about Jesus, the relation to Marduk, Osiris, Isis and Horus, the more I think about it, and that pondering about the name Jesus being a strongman ritual, the more it makes sense. The strongman ritual was done in, was it plus 15-ish? Somewhere around there. In 1969, the English scriptwriter, producer and researcher Henry Lincoln became intrigued, and he is said to have discovered one of the encrypted messages which read to Dagobert II, King, and to Sion with an S, belongs this treasure, and he is there dead. And this was probably an allusion to the tomb and shrine of Sigebert IV, a real or mythical son of Dagobert II, which would not only prove that the Merovingian dynasty did not end with the death of the king, but that the Priory of Sion has been entrusted with the duty to protect his relics like a treasure. All of which is very interesting, as we all thought it was supposed to be about protecting the line of Jesus and his wife Mary Magdalene, not Merovingian king lines. Merovingians are an overlay. But I said in the show, see how it crosses over and then confuses, just like we mentioned in the Angels and Demons Codes and Lines Part 1 show, of how scholars were deliberately misleading between Mary the mother and Mary the alleged wife of Jesus. And in came the Catholic Church into discrediting or muddying the waters sufficiently to make those interested in the subject confused. Now, the dossier secrets at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which, though alleging to portray hundreds of years of medieval history, they say were actually all written by Plantard and de Cherisy under the pseudonym of Philippe Toscan de Plantier, according to their script. Yeah, in classic common sense questions again. Why would the French National Archive house frauds to begin with? Now, the authors also incorporated the anti-Semitic and anti-Masonic tract known as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion into their story, concluding that it was actually based on the master plan of the Priory of Sion. But the Protocols of the Elders of Zion underwent similar scrutiny, and they had governments declaring it as a hoax as well. But it's all true though. As we discovered in our series From His Story to Our Story, plus it shows the lengths of that the Jewish elites will go to not discover their true purpose and to destroy our history. And they went on to blame the Scottish Rite for the protocols. Hello, Liam. And so in came the Masonic cult into the picture. Remember the piece in the shows in From His Story to Our Story, Part 6? The Illuminati, the Rothschilds clan, and the Zito Masons. That is what that is referring to. Some occultists speculated that the emergence of the Priory of Sion and Plantard closely follows the prophecies by M. Michael Nostradamus. Unaware, it was said, that Plantard was intentionally trying to fulfill them. Now, Nostradamus was also born in France as well, which brings in the connection between France and the Roman Church. And France was practically ran by the Jewish Elite Club since around the 400 AD. What is lesser known and revealed is Nostradamus was Jewish. And it's funny no one questioned his predictions. A bit like Einstein, really, who's also Jewish. Now, in 1990, Plantard revised himself by claiming he was only descended from a cadet branch of the line of Dagobert II, while arguing that the direct descendant was really Otto von Habsburg. The Habsburgs, well, I never. Now, further adding to the mystery as it expanded out, added other familiar names to the list in this piece, like the P2 Lodge, another Catholic church group, Opus Dei, again linked to the church, Rosicrucians and Red Cross, Knight Templar and Hospitallers, plus the Knights of Malta. Again, all three corrupt groups linked to the Catholic Church. And I asked, has anyone asked why that is the case? Plus, you can add the Mafia to that list as well. The narrative went into listing 26 Grand Masters of the Priory of Sion from 1188 to 1963. And notable names were Leonardo da Vinci, the Lorraine family, the St. Clair family, and Sir Isaac Newton. Funny no one questioned his theories either. But the lengths they will go to keep their secret hidden world away from the light is fairly extraordinary. Several books and patsies later, it hasn't worked. What is more, it won't work any longer. Too many people now are investigating and researching this type of material, plus our own series has shed much light on these usurpers and their vast network. Much of that vast network has now crumbled, and yes, all roads did lead to Rome and that insidious church that has raped, pillaged, murdered, deceived and harvested the people of the world since its inception. Those days are coming to a close now, as more and more of our story is revealed. The next must listen to show documented the role of another of the secret clubs and its role in subverting the people. From his story to our story +9, the US deep state. And the US deep state in the 21st century is a vital organ of the supranational deep state. It controls the US government with its uber-dominant role in the global trade in weapons, and aligned with the CIA, which dominates the global illegal drugs trade. The NSA and Silicon Valley, who carry out global surveillance, plus the businesses of Wall Street, and it all interlocks closely with the UK deep state, and in doing so links both of them to the Crown. And we have come to see that today's Congress itself is dominated by the deep state powers that profit the America's global war machine, or the military-industrial complex as it is lesser known as. And these so-called statesmen of America are as dedicated to the preservation of American dominance as were their British predecessors a century ago. They are a collection of Israeli-based sellouts at its core, and I say that as both Britain and America are ran by the Jewish elites, and their countries and their peoples harvested by this off-world cult. A vast network based on rampant compartmentalization, fake acts and security clearances that even keeps Congress away from even questioning them. So who are the main players in setting this all up? Well, private bankers, but a silent W, started the ball rolling. Franklin Roosevelt added to it by introducing the Forced School Act, designed to make the populace uneducated and adapt to the authority doctrines and mind control. Elite colleges and secret societies came in, like the Skull and Bones, the dining clubs and the money trust, based largely around the J.P. Morgan family line. In came the Nazis, OSS, and then the CIA. In the 20th century, it took a deep turn, and unbeknownst to many students of the shallow political history, the US government has undergone at least 5 attempted coups d'etats in the 20th century alone, all with connections to members of the Bush family. A key factor in all of this was the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, a fake entry into World War I and World War II initiated by the same bankers. In the 1930s saw the rise of another in-house group, who we had covered previously, the Suite 8F group. The Suite 8F group was a Texas-based deep state faction which coalesced around the interests of big oil. Now, Texans were elected on December 7th, 1931, and not only to the speakership of the House, but to the chairmanship of 5 of its most influential committees. Lyndon Johnson's first day in the Capitol was the day Texas came to power, a power that the state was to hold with only the briefest interruptions for more than 30 years. Now, the group was heavily involved in the assassination of JFK, who was moving against the interests of big oil, something else that was ran by the tyrannous Bush family. Next was the business plot. That was an attempted coup d'etat by the Money Trust and J.P. Morgan. After researching fascist governments in Europe, a group of bankers and businessmen approached the anti-war general Smedley Butler, seeking someone popular enough to lead a force of 500,000 men to take control of the government in Washington, D.C. and force Franklin Roosevelt to resign. Now, Butler played along, sounding interested and supportive, but was secretly horrified and eventually exposed the plot to Congress. Operation Gladio, which is run by the P2 Lodge and the CIA, of subverting governments and installing their puppets. The CIA then played another central role in creating the fake Cold War, which siphoned hundreds of billions of dollars and put a whole country in fear with their propaganda of the Russians are coming. I think they took the slow boat to China. Now, that program also was launched in schools to put all American children in fear, stating nuclear bombs were coming, and all the children underwent drills in class. The untold damage that did to the children has barely been covered. And is it any wonder that 60% of Americans have mental health problems? Again, that is the effect. The cause are these psychopaths. It covered a new group to many people called the Georgetown Set, who are responsible for smoothing the path to the creation of the CIA and also the National Security Act. They are a private think tank group that influences many things just outside of DC. In the 1950s, it brought in the TV and radio lies and mind control program called Operation Mockingbird by the recently created CIA, which in essence was not new as it operated in the UK previously and was called the OSS. It was only new where it was stationed. It highlighted the first of several coups d'etats down by the CIA called Operation Ajax. The 1950s also brought in the Bilderberger meetings again, but Operation Mockingbird would get its first real test early in the next decade in the 1960s. That first test was the JFK assassination that had CIA grubby fingers all over it. But the Mockingbird spin was in full mode and overdrive, and the furore died down. Eisenhower warned against the military-industrial complex in the 1960s also, and the CIA continued their murderous and subverting of many countries' leaders throughout that decade, particularly in South America. The Vietnam War that decade was a large source of revenue for the US deep state, both through arms and drugs. The CIA had controlled the Southeast Asian drug trade since 1956, just after the Korean War, and used the war to scale up the heroin trade and boost the US market through exposing young US soldiers to the drug. Yes, they gave their own soldiers heroin. And the CIA also developed the social destabilization tactics Operation Phoenix, which it would unleash in South America before scaling up the drug trades there. Operation Phoenix was torture. And they used the war to scale up the heroin trade. Fast forward 50 years and they did the same tactic in Afghanistan, not to mention them poisoning their own alleged soldiers. In the 1970s oversaw more skullduggery involving the CIA again, plus the FBI got in on the act with the Watergate affair. That decade also saw the Pike and Church committees investigating the corruption within the agencies and the Mockingbird program. The cover-up of the JFK assassination continued into this decade as 21 people destined to testify before the Warren, was it the Warren Committee or the Pike Committee? Anyway, before the committee, all 21 people mysteriously died. And yet typically no one investigated that and linked it to the original crime, probably all crushed with the threat of death or via blackmail and leveraging. The 1970s also heralded the sale of arms to Libya, again facilitated by the CIA, to Saddam Hussein. The US National Security Advisor, Brzezinski, another Jew, planned for regime change in Iran, including many methods and covert tactics that are familiar 40 years later. Brzezinski was a Polish Jew. Remember, at this time, Brzezinski and Kissinger were dominating foreign policy. Both of them were Jewish. And if people don't like that fact, tough titties. It is what it is. It was around this time the CIA was offshoring many of its enterprises. Offshoring is a fancy term for taking over other countries. In came a new group called the Safari Club. And the Safari Club was a covert alliance of intelligence services formed in 1976 that ran clandestine operations around Africa. The Safari Club was a resort in Kenya, majority owned by the arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi, who is related to the former journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered by the Israeli-Saudi royal family connections, and he was also related to Dodi al-Fayed, who was his nephew, who was going to be the father-in-law to Princess Diana. In 1980 saw the US deep state handing over money to the Iranians in return for hostages, and the hostages were prevented from coming home until after the elections though, and until Ronald Reagan got in office. And word has it that the original Reagan was killed in that assassination attack and a double replaced him. That way the original Reagan couldn't talk, and this is likely what led to the factions within the CIA. Langley 1 are Reaganites, Langley 2, Bush, Langley 3, Obama and the Muslim Brotherhood, and an unknown Langley 4 was created around 2019. George Herbert Wanker Bush used his White House positions to engage in a vast criminal romp including drug trafficking, financial fraud, savings and loan fraud, and even the HUD fraud. The profit of these frauds was liberally shared both with friends and enemies, although most of it went to the CIA. A new group at this time called the Enterprise, who moved weapons and money to the Taliban, which, like the Saddam Hussein event, created a future war. The Enterprise ran at least 2 VIP pedophile operations, which were later exposed, which was headed by Craig Spence and Larry King. Yes, that Larry King. Again, Jewish. And then after giving weapons to Libya, Iraq and Taliban, all of which was a precursor to war, the next stage was set of giving weapons and arms to Iran in the Iran-Contra affair, which again was facilitated by the CIA. Selling weapons to Iran? According to the media, that was unthinkable, but they did. But they were not the only ones setting up Iran for a future war, because the Israelis, I will repeat again, the Israelis gave nuclear weapons to Iran in the 1990s. Iran is not Israel's enemy by and large, as the top end there is ran by the Donmei Jews. The 1990s saw the conclusion of Operation Hammer. The resulting political and economic changes provided vast opportunities for looting, which saw entire industries sold for a pittance, making a tiny number of people, the so-called Russian oligarchs, into billionaires. Except they were not Russian by and large. They were mainly all Jewish again. And this has been the great con played out by the Mockingbird media run by the CIA to discredit Russia when it was all for the benefit of the Jewish shekel makers. The 1990s also saw the rise of the Clintons. Recruited in London by a CIA asset called Maya, Clinton was the Arkansas representative of the cabal, a state of particular importance due to the fact that Mena, Arkansas was the main transshipment point for the CIA's cocaine. By 1991, preparations were being made for the 9/11 event. Alex Station, the CIA's super-secret Get Bin Laden station, was set up and charged with tracking Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. This was to prove useful in protecting the 19 hijackers from honest law enforcement officials, it is said. Now, bin Laden, remember, was a CIA asset called Tim Osman. Next came the Oklahoma false flag bombing, killing 168. This was done to end the investigations into the enterprise group that was going on in that building. Echoing other suspicious events, the FBI quickly confiscated CCTV footage of the event and later reportedly lost a crucial tape. Those tactics played out after 9/11 also. In the 21st century, clear evidence of suppression of an investigation into a child trafficking ring with blatantly obvious ties to US military and intelligence organisations. That was the Finders cult set up and ran by the CIA. September the 11th, 2001. Much has been written about this fateful day in American history. Most know by now the official story was a complete fairy tale. Several deep state operations were in full flow that day, and several so-called protection units suddenly all stood down on that day. The safest country in the world, they said. Yes, until some of their own decided it wasn't. Predictably, the Bushes were involved, Kissinger also, and like the Oklahoma bombing, was designed to cover up criminal investigations again. Around 3,000 were sacrificed, and many more died later, due to what was in the detonation bombs installed within the building. Plus, it launched a second war in Iraq within a decade to appease the shekel-making bankers and divided up the oil between America, Israel and Iran. The irony next was America was then to have a Muslim president with a fake name. Next came a game show host to heap more embarrassment on the public, quickly followed by fake news rhetoric, alleged riots at the Capitol and Johns Hopkins math in the election. And people forget Trump got in under fake circumstances as well, because Hillary Clinton was already dead. Towards the end of the Trump reign came pandemic simulations that turned out to be real. ID 2020 and the biometric next level spying games, plus Zionist fascism against the people again in the form of COVID. Sadly, too many COVIDiots fell for it, and the end of the terminal decline of America was now entering its final stages. There were many deep exposure of the deep state within that show, involving murder, coercion, blackmail, financial fraud, child pedophile rings, and many others. We ended that show with an exclusive, a look at and the total naming of every worldwide US military base, which also at the top levels comes under the banner of the deep state. 900 bases, billions of dollars a year, and what benefits do the people get from them? None. A common theme that, it seems. Clowns. Who needs clowns? We don't. The next must listen to show was the start of a multi-part series that is still ongoing. And following a piece about the Rus in the main show, we started this one off with the story of the Aryans, from his story to our story plus 20. And like the Rus piece, the pieces that supported the show was written in a half-truth manner. And this was no different given the Jewish elites' control over the media. But I corrected it and added to it in our usual THI way. But one of the greatest conspiracies and indeed tricks played on humanity came out of World War II, was the great cover-up and subsequent denigration of a whole group of peoples perpetrated by those who have plagued this world and many others for hundreds of thousands of years. It created a mind meme that lives on until this very day. And for years the term went unchallenged, and those who dared to speak out were jailed, silenced, killed, or labelled in horrible ways that stigmatised a whole race. And yet the world said nothing due to the fear programmes of anti-Semitism, religious fervour, and the demonising of these peoples. Those peoples are the Aryans, who have been vilified, labelled as white supremacists, had their history discounted and discredited. And to what end? The end of the white race, the elite Jewish elements all desire and have done for thousands of years. Using every trick known to man via religion, finance, governance, bloodline families and houses that took over every traditional white country with their special brand of filth, debauchery and death. Their countries, whether it was Russia, Germany, France, England, or all the Balkan and Slav countries, all turned upside down and inside out by these usurpers. For almost 3 centuries, European linguists, anthropologists and geneticists have been searching, they say, for the true origins of the Indo-European or Aryan peoples. First off, Aryans are not Indo-European at all. They are Rus, from Russia. And the report says many will identify the term Aryan with the German National Socialism, while some Jewish and liberal academics propose that Aryans are non-existent people that was invented by Hitler to enhance a feeling of Germanic supremacy. This, of course, is false. But why did the Jewish feel that they needed to comment? Unless, of course, they have something to hide. Why is it so important whether the Aryans are real or not to the Jewish? Aryan is also a series of religious or folk beliefs, it was said, that also have a common denominator. The race which originally created the language, culture and religious roots of the descendants of the Aryans were of the Nordic race, based on both genetic, archaeological and living examples of people in Europe and the northern, more isolated regions of Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, northern India, Kurdistan, Iraq, Asia Minor, and many other similar Near Eastern and Asiatic regions. Notice how they left out the one country they mainly originated from, Russia. The establishment have done everything to denigrate Russia and deny its role in our history. But according to Hindu beliefs, the father of the Aryans was Manu, or in English, man. Thus in English the word man more properly signifies Aryan, which could possibly also mean higher universal Aryan. But the author of this piece kept saying the Aryans invaded this and that country. No, they never. They colonised empty lands. And he said we have no clue what the original language was spoken in the prehistoric Europe of 30,000 years ago. Not even linguistic reconstruction can give us a definitive answer to that. Well, we can. It was likely Rus or Sanskrit. But scholars are oblivious or prevented from ever mentioning Russia in a positive light. And various examples were given of strange European skulls being found in China, Georgia, Zimbabwe and many other places. But the propensity to wrap the Aryan people's story into an Indian culture narrative was frankly embarrassing. All because some people won't or can't face the truth, plus the Jewish agenda thrown in as well. We spoke of the origin of the swastika, another Rus Aryan item overlaid by pro-pagan Dar in World War II. Of how it is a solar disk of worship and signifies the flow of life within everything connected to the Rus and the Urs. Scholars have provided a considerable number of theories for the symbolic meaning of the swastika, that it represents the sun, the moon, the yearly rotation of Ursa Major, cardinal points, eternity, Zeus, Baal and fire. Now the Sun and Ursa Major are correct, add in Ursa Minor as well, given the rotating around the northern pole star is Polaris and it is in Ursa Minor. Or several Hindu deities were referenced as well, among them Agni, Indra, Vishnu and Ganesh. Light, forked lightning, water, the union of sexes, fertility and the fire-making apparatus known as the fire drill. We've had a few fire drills in the village this year, just saying. And like science, law and math, add other things into the equation to make it confusing when it's not. It spoke of the rise of Christianity, another program designed to damage the white race and also to take all races who followed it away from the gods and source. Christianity is a worship of the Draconians. Now, of course, the religions were brought in by Lucifer around 22,000 BC, had their own solar leader at this time, Ra. Isis was the planetary Mother Mary, and Horus was Jesus. All of them usurpers and worshipped by the Jewish, Mormon and Egyptian cults, plus Freemasonry. In time, modern archaeologists found traces of their millennia-old corpses preserved in desert sands or frigid glaciers. Even viable samples of their DNA would eventually be discovered. And yet, was that DNA revelation not covered up? All to hide the main race here, long before the other races arrived, likely in slave ships. And in addition to such physical remains, a wealth of historical and mythological evidence, both in written form and oral tradition, spoke of lost civilizations consisting of fair-skinned gods and light-eyed benefactors who helped establish new cultures. And according to numerous North American Indian accounts, at the dawn of their society they were visited by a great white god arriving from a faraway land located across the sea, they said, who established their new mode of life and then departed, promising to someday return. That is the Urs and the Rus. Indeed, to our ancestors, those who inhabited the western part of Eurasia, were not made in the image of God's likeness, but rather the gods were a mirror reflection of ours. In Aryan culture, these gods are exemplified by the Greek Olympians and the Teutonic Azir, among others. The Azir are the Odins and Thor group. The ancient Greek world was referred to by the Hellenes as the land of gods and monsters. The monsters they speak of are of the giants who were destroyed by the Azirs and also the Olympians. Some of these were known as the Titans. We still see remarkably European-like faces in those areas to this day, because that is who they are. Now, one of the most notable faces was featured on a famous cover of National Geographic. A young girl who years later was tracked down to her home with her husband and children, a face the photographer never forgot. Why? Because that young girl in Iran had piercing blue eyes. Native to the European culture, not Middle Eastern origin. And many Iranians have blue eyes because they are descendants of the white race. Among the Afghans, Northern Indians, Iranians and Kurds, there are many people who strike out from the crowd as being quite out of place among the other swarthy inhabitants. The peoples of the regions are much lighter skinned than those of the south, but many defy separation from our European populations. And this show revealed much evidence all over the world of Caucasian mummies being unearthed and covered up by the authorities. And that action by the authorities reveals in stark clarity the cover-up of the history of not only the white race, but our planet's history as well. And that tells you there is an anti-white program running right there. And all people should demand answers as to why the authorities would deny our history. These remains are ancient and have implications far beyond their apparent novelty and uniqueness. They are physical remnants of a forgotten race. They are a lost series of human tribes whose descendants now only make up 8% of the world population, but continue to influence culture, technology, scientific and educational achievement. This race has far surpassed any other group of people in terms of the arts and in communication, and are far different than anything present today. Their lineage goes back to a distant, forgotten epoch of humankind. Far back into antiquity, a lost race of men produced an advanced culture at a time conventional scientists say no humans could have done so. They are a testament to their gods and way of life that is not nor can be equalled in the past or the present. This is a lost race of cultural and technological giants whose previous civilization has been lost forever. Their influence, however, has brought about the inception of human intelligence as we know it and given birth to the very first ancient civilization, indeed all of human culture. It spoke of India, the Middle East and southern Russian peoples, all potentially meeting the sky people of the past. In reality, we are all sky people. All came from different planets and solar systems away from our own, largely due to the ridiculous wars lasting eons, one of which lasted 249.5 billion years. An ancient legend, according to the birth of the world, said that a giant being, Pan-Ku, who was described as having long blonde hair which covered most of his body, created the world and its people from his own body and hair. And this legend mirrors ancient European myths such as that of both Germanic and Celtic tribes. The fact it was the ancient Aryans who brought the Chinese the wheel, the domesticated horse and even iron weapons has been preserved in their mythology as a racial memory of past events. Now sadly, the Chinese then mixed the horse and humans and created chimeras, which went on to slaughtering many humans in that region. The carvings of Boing Shan reveals that as a fact, worshipped as a Buddhist site, all of which doesn't say much for Buddhism. But according to Chinese myth, some of their most ancient pyramids, including those near Mongolia and the Tarim Basin, where the Caucasian mummies were found, were built by the sun gods. And these Chinese sun gods were depicted as being tall, blonde and blue-eyed with a light, ruddy complexion. They were not Chinese. They were the Rus and the Urs. And this whole chapter spoke of the white race being all over the world, yet curiously never mentioned Russia in the overall picture. Now those with critical thinking skills and the fact they are trying to erase the white race history would say perhaps the white race came from there after all. Indeed, the very first man came from the north, not Africa, as that was Enki, Enlil and the Anu story. A massive cover-up of our real history for white and all other races. Negative mind memes created about white people like Aryan, Nazi, white supremacist, all to denigrate one race. And this whole piece supposedly about the Aryans and the white race, and yet the article never mentioned Russia once. And the great question is, why? Why has the white race history been erased? Why are the likes of the Smithsonian and Egyptologists rewriting history in a false manner? Indeed, the much revered ancient alien crew are no different. It's the Egyptian river again. Denial. Who stands to gain from all of this? Well, the answer is in our own books, and this series, From His Story to Our Story, reveals that to be those connected to the Jewish culture, race, and not religion, but law. It is they who control this planet in terms of finance, business, culture, education, media, and governance. And that control has allowed them over time to not only enslave and control us, but deny us all our true history. The next most listened to show was called The Vedas, Bruce and Heirs, From His Story to Our Story plus 21, and went into a deep dive about life around 40,000 years ago. And this was THI's longest ever show in terms of time and also words. It also detailed the past about the lost continent Aryan and the predicted future of the failure of the white race to heed the warnings given to them by the gods and those with the ancient wisdom. They warned of the Koshis, they warned about preaching to fake gods, they warned against the mixing of the races and many other things. And sadly, those warnings fell on deaf ears. And this show was all about the Santis, written approximately 40,000 years ago, and is something that, in my opinion, should be taught in every school around the world. Not because it comes from the white race, but because it teaches morals, manners, life, birth, the cycles, and how to be and operate within life, as well as how not to be. Now, to imagine what Santis look like, you should remember that every Santi consists of 4 plates. Each plate has 4 shlocks, 2 on each side, and every shlock has 9 lines. Every line has a single upper celestial line, under which are written 16 runes. 9 Santis on 36 plates makes up 1 circle, and these plates containing 144 shlocks are fastened together with 3 rings. The 3 rings resemble the atom shape and is also a soul development upgrade symbol. 9 circles of Santis containing 1296 shlocks, or 11,664 lines, or 186,624 mutually controlled Aryan runes, make up image-bearing collections which has been called since the most ancient times Vader. The Norse word Ada probably originates from the word Vader, but that was not confirmed. It should also be noted that those figures just given out all equal 9 or are derivatives of it. The content of the Book of Wisdom of Perun has a form of a dialogue and was written nearly 40,000 years ago. And this was at the time they were bringing in the colour races to mix in with and bring down the white race, as revealed by Finkelstein and many others. And this is not the trigger for colour races to react or feel shame or guilt. It is what it is, and my belief is they were all brought here as slaves. And what happened in the past should not be reflected in the now. And it spoke about the Asgards and referenced 5 of them. 1, Asgard the heavenly ancestral home of white humanity. 2, Asgard of the Aryan, located on the northern continent on top of Mount Mira, known to other peoples as Mount Meru. The mainland was divided by rivers into 4 provinces: Swaga, Hora, Ray and Thule, or Thule if you're American. While according to legends, the rivers did not flow out but flowed in, as if rising to the top. There was an inland sea or lake, in the centre of which was the Mountain of Peace, and on its top Asgard. 3, Asgard of Aryan was founded in summer 5028 from the Great Migration from Aryan at the confluence of the holy rivers Iri and Om. And this city became the capital of Paleadorian, the legendary country of freedom in Russian folk legends. Paleadorian is defined as a legendary land, the spiritual centre of the ancient faith and the White Brotherhood, a paradise located somewhere in the east. And at present many people place it now in Tibet, now in Shambhala, because there are mountain rivers that have a white colour. River Iri is mentioned as white, heavenly purity water, all of which sounds like the Milk Ocean, which now lies below the Himalayas. The great temple was built of Ural stone and was 1,000 arshins, or 2,333 feet in height, from the base to the top of the Alatir mountain. It was a huge pyramidal structure of 4 temples, one above the other, located in the centre of the circle of temple buildings. 2 temples were above ground and 2 underground, as above, so below. Asgard of Sogdian, the power of Sogdinia, was built to protect the southern borders of Rusinia, the holding on which the great race settled. Asgard Sogdi was located in Asia Minor, and many researchers believed that the capital was Ashgabat. 5. Asgard Svit-Iodsky, Asgard illuminated by the light of Odin, and it was located on the territory of Scandinavia. After the Great Fire, the merchants brought some disease, cholera or typhus, plagues. When Asgard burned down, a new city called Uppsala was built in its place. Next followed the 9 Santis with 144 reference points. And in Santi 1 was an introduction to the gods and explaining the worlds of Prav, Nav and Yav, also the Vitmanas and Vitmaras. In Santi 2 was all about striving to and accepting the wisdom, only achieved by purity, internalizing and spiritually developing oneself. In Santi 3 it brought us life lessons: observe, don't absorb, caring and sharing, plus need not greed. All valuable lessons for us all to embrace. In Santi 4 it taught us about truth, knowledge, wisdom, nature and serving a higher purpose. Life lessons of how to be and how not to be, service to others, not just the self. And in my opinion, this Santi should replace the Bible for all children. In Santi 5, this section was warning of the future consequences of life here after they had departed. a warning about an alien predator coming and the penalty of mixing and not adhering to the great teachings. In Santi 6, this next passage speaks of even graver times for the Aryans, a great war, poisoned water and food, plus a disconnect from the teachings and the ancient ways. The great fall began, and we have yet to fully recover. In Santi 7, this next Santi was all about the reteaching of the ancient ways, codes, morals and wisdom. In Santi 8, they gave further warnings and also the hope it and they will return to change the dark forces' ways. Forecasting to return around 40,000 years from when this was recorded, all of which means they are due back here soon, or perhaps in some ways they are already here. In Santi 9, this section explains the fall of that time period, a warning from the past to the future and housed here in the now. And this may well cause triggers within you, I said. Find time beyond this show to work through them. In Theosophy, it is believed that the 7 stars of the Pleiades focus the spiritual energy of the 7 rays from the galactic logos to the 7 stars of the Great Bear, which is a Ursa Major. Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Oh my. And then on to Sirius, then to the Sun, then to the God of Earth, it was said Sanat Kumara, and finally through the 7 masters of the 7 rays to the human race. The master of the 7 rays is the overviewer. Remember the drawing I showed many of you of the single point of light or information, and how you only see from one point, but when you go behind it, it becomes 7 points or rays. Now, Sanat Kumara is regarded as the Lord or Regent of Earth and of humanity, and he is thought to be the physical incarnation of the planetary Logos, the living being that ensouls this planet. There's only one problem with that. The planetary Logos is a female, not male. And that is explaining the fall of the divine feminine and replaced by dark force aliens. Sanat spawned from the word Santa and Satan. And Helena Blavatsky asserted, as being the operative word, that Sanat Kumara belonged to a group of 30 beings called the Lords of the Flame, who were from the planet Venus. And in Judeo-Christian tradition, these same beings are presented as Lucifer and the angels who fell from the Godhead to earth. The planet Venus is not the main planet of this solar system, so that's not happening either. It is Midgard. Venus was Luciferia and female, not Lucifer. Lucifer signifies the fall of the Logos in this planetary system. And during this time, the Lord of the solar system, or the solar Logos, is believed to release cosmic energy to Earth in order to keep our planet's cosmic energy in balance. The Lord, by its name, was an imposter, like the male god of Earth, and also many centuries the solar Logos, Ra, the serpent god. Now, thankfully, much of those dark entities have now been replaced, and the solar Logos original has returned, as has the divine feminine energies. Is there any doubt at this point this is not unfolded here? And it matters not which colour, skin or race you are listening or reading this piece. What matters is, will you adopt or adapt to the teachings of how to be and how to act in a much more adult-based way? And yes, if you are black-skinned in the modern day, the passage of non-mixing will come across as racist, but it is but mere geneticism. And with the adult understanding of geneticism, those passages will make much more sense. We assumed we were all the same. In essence, as humanoids, we are. But we are not from the same planet or even the same solar system. And it is from that understanding and perspective that the heirs spoke. We are all not so different, because when a black male or female brings a white partner into the fold, it is frowned upon in the community. The same applies with black and Hispanic and the natives with other races, not to mention the Jewish race and their no-mixing Talmudic law. Why? Not because of racism, but it is genetic coded memory. And I said at the time, maybe the balancer in me at times reaches too far of how I think we should all come and stick together. I fail to see why our differences cannot be set aside and become friends and working colleagues while sticking to genetic boundaries. And perhaps that can only come when all the Jewish narrative falls and the truth is revealed on a wider scale, not just from THI. But our fall and decay was not from the mind, but the heart. We replaced understanding with illusion, mind memory and lies. We replaced abilities with technology and, worst of all, replaced love with fear. Ancient knowledge and truth have become unbelievable to a mass of people, too lazy to not learn outside of a script given to them by their own slave masters. God's teaching and helping people without idolatry, but with humility, truth, honour, integrity and respect, minus the anger management issues that imbued all the other gods. A God is a helper and service to others. The gods of the Bible were all service to self. Big difference. And the Vedas are the path to enlightenment for us all. The next must listen to show was called The Vedas Part 2 and From His Story to Our Story plus 22. And this show went deeper into the lives of the Rus, Aryan and Slavs, and the four Karatyas began the show. Karatya 1 covered the beginning of life after the migration from the Arya. It spoke of the creator called Ra Hama, the light life giver from the stream of Inglia. The great stream of Inglia is the life-giving light and the primary fire of the universe, in which the universes and our Urilla sun system with Midgard Earth appeared. It spoke about the golden path, the path of the gods, where with soul development we can all reside in and on. It spoke about the world of trees, which is the universal tree I have spoken about, that contains all the universes or realities. As the branches of the tree were connected to the primordial living light of the leaves, reality with the mighty shining trunks, and the trunks of the world trees were rooted in the infinite new eternity generated in the new reality. The great trees of the worlds are universal world structures. On Earth, these universal world structures were embodied in the images of the sacred trees, which are still revered by white people. Iga or Yggdrasil, oak, birch, ash, etc. And now you know why they cut down the giant trees. It was to take the energy away from Midgard. The memories of which was triggered in people around the world with the first Avatar movie. Many left the theatre crying. And for those who doubt the genetic memory I put forward in relation to the created meme of racism, those emotions in and after that movie reveals it to be a fact. The world of spiritual power is a multi-dimensional and diverse world located at higher levels of the golden path compared to the manifest world of Midgard Earth. And the dark forces think they can cheat their way into the world of spiritual power by going more dark. They were lied to. The ultimate trick of seducement by choosing the perceived easier path. There is no easier or harder path on the path of spirituality. And by that I mean there are no shortcuts. You attain each level based upon what your efforts, lessons learned, interactions have garnered. There is no cheat code. There is no masking. There is no lying on that level. It is the ultimate truth of where each of you are at based on your applications only. And then we found out about the difference between a sun and a star. A star is a celestial body around which there is a system consisting of 1 to 7 Earths, or stars. That is, there are star systems where several small ones revolve around a large star, and this central luminary is called the star. The sun is a celestial body around which more than 7 Earths revolve. Now, Karatya 2 spoke of the birth and the creation of realities and worlds. But in many realities and the beings inhabiting the abode of life had the same number of feelings. But the feelings of beings in these realities lying next to each other were different. And for different thinking beings, different suns and stars shone. And that adds a whole new meaning to the THI meme now of think different, does it not? In Karatya 3 it spoke of the great battle and how Chernobog swayed onto the dark path. Chernobog decided with the help of cunning to circumvent the universal laws of ascent along the golden path of spiritual development established by the god Svarog. At that time, the call of Chernobog rang out to all the worlds, spaces and realities lying along the golden path. The dark Lehi, the dark Arlegs and the Koshi, the rulers of hell, flew to him uninvited, and with them the whole army of hell flew to him. Belobog alone could not resist such dark forces, and Chernobog tore off the first security seal, the seal from which the ancient knowledge of the world of Arlegs. Belobog called for help from the higher worlds, and he turned to the guardians of the world of knowledge. But the keepers of the secret ancient wisdom of the world of knowledge remained indifferent, since they did not want to fight with Chernobog, considering him a free in the choice of his actions. A catastrophic mistake from such higher beings. You see, we all make mistakes no matter which level you are at. In Karate 4, it spoke of how the worlds were arranged and the spiritual teaching about karma and the goddess Karna, and how priests were in caste based upon their development. A caste back then was about a union of 100 people, not about race. How suns or stars were not just all yellow like ours. It spoke of the senses, where we believe we only have 5 plus a possible extra one, when in reality with development we have 12. The worlds along the golden path and how they all had a power number for each world. The world of people is 4-dimensional, they said. So why are we stuck in 3D whilst evolving ourselves further into 2D, one might ask. But if you run life as a picture, TV or phone screen, then ultimately you are immersing yourself or conditioning yourself towards a 2D realm. Unless, of course, you apply the depth. The path of spiritual development is known as the golden path, and there are also intermediate worlds, 5, 7, 9, 12 and a smaller number of dimensions. The peculiarity of the world structure is that all worlds, all realities, regardless of the number of dimensions that determine them, are all in the same place in relation to human understanding and to that infinite closure while filling our entire universe. But there are barriers between the worlds and realities of different dimensions, which can be overcome and joined the life of another world or reality only by receiving the number of feelings and those qualities that are characteristic of such a world or reality. Now, the number of feelings is describing the right frequency to enter. That is based upon your own soul development. Some worlds or universes with the same number of dimensions exist next to each other, while realities penetrate one another. And that is how some UFOs appear and disappear. They blade through, in and out of our reality. It's a bit like cloaking that is done by crafts, and also ourselves if we develop enough. But the more complex the structure of the world or reality in a certain area of the golden path, the greater the chances for the inhabitants of this area to be reflected in the consciousness of the worlds or realities of less complexity. Yet what is about to be attempted between now and 2072 and beyond is the ability to transcend in body for the first time. Now, at the base of the golden path is the world of people, and the ascent of a person to a higher world or higher reality is possible only as a result of spiritual development. For this, the gods came to the world of people, and the teachers of mankind came. They are beings of a higher order of complexity, who come down to guide and transmit the higher knowledge and commandments. After all, not only he himself works on the development of the spiritual path and the spiritual essence of a person, but also the universal forces that elevate or delay his spiritual path and spiritual development. They came, but did you listen? Did you realise what you had before you lost it? I guess time will tell. Now, throughout the golden path, the only true and unconditional law of the universe operates. Love for everything that exists, and creation and the birth of love is preceded by wise knowledge. The birth of love is preceded by wise knowledge. And I would add soul development to that, to then be able to experience the birth of love through the music of the spheres. Through love and knowledge, each spiritual essence develops, rising to the Creator and gradually comprehending His creation, and having cognized, begins to create something of its own, filled with love. The highest manifestation of love is self-sacrifice to help the lower. This is what the Lehigh do, who lead people and the highest bearers of the spiritual heritage, who bring to people the knowledge of the supreme, perfect love. Love teaches understanding, mercy, and sacrifice. And these qualities prepare a person for service to others and for creativity, which is seen as a struggle against evil, as complicity in the deeds of the transformation of the world. It is necessary to properly consider the fight against evil, as evil is not absolute. Evil is only a manifestation of underdevelopment and also ignorance. We next covered the book of Ingleism, which was intended to tell modern man the true truth without any distortions and false interpretations about the ancient faith of the Slavic and Aryan peoples. The Rus and Aryans were labelled as pagans, but again that was an overlay of the Dark Forces program, as paganism involved more sacrifices to the fake gods. We covered most of the distortions of the countries and religions of Europe, all created by the Dark Forces, not us. We covered the real meaning and purpose behind Christianity and other religions, to take people away from themselves, worship fake gods, and deny the truth and your own power. The real faith, not religion, was the Yinglings. How words were twisted, mistranslated, and as the song says, and you know sometimes words have two meanings. Well, sometimes there are more than two. For example, immortality and immortality, both are spelt the same way, but the figurative meaning of the first word means the spirit demon of death, and the figurative meaning of the second is eternity. And we ended that show with this, another tale of confusion, diffusion, smoke and mirrors, and to what end? To hide the truth of this planet's history in favour of the Dark Forces. A new day will dawn for those who stand long, the last song said. And yes, that new day dawned of Svarog on March 21st, 2020, and is here to stay for many lifetimes here. This is just the beginning. Only the light decide the end. The how, what and when is determined by us. And at the end of the day, it is all about love, the attainment of love, aspiring to love, the embracing of love. To be in love means one has to first love themselves. One then has to dance in love, envelop in love, rise in love, and when mixed with another being of higher love, then the sparks of creation flies. It bristles with excitement, joy and happiness. Happiness creates and operates along the golden path. Do you care to join it? The question then remains, will you become and be love, my love, our love, and become part of love for the all? The solution is we all rise in love and take the golden path together and create and manifest our own future. Where are we next? The next and final must listen to show of the year was From His Story to Our Story plus 23, the Vedas part 3. And this was a deep impact show on us all, and much pondering and realignment of thoughts and thinking came from this show. We started off with the laws of Rita and telegony. The system dismissed it as a pseudoscience. The irony is most of their theories come under the same allegation, and yet the show went on to proving its legitimacy. It covered telegony in the Middle Ages and referenced Braveheart and their defence of Scotland by the English, who sought to denigrate them through sex with every bride. It then covered telegony in the Bible, a sordid tale of how Judah departed from his brothers for the crime of marrying a non-Jew, which under common sense terms is racist and supremacist. But as we have found out, that only applies to the white people, and the Jewish culture and its horrors goes untouched. But thankfully, many are now beginning to see through that illusion. Purification of the image was next up. Here it touched upon the image of the first man. The woman's first sexual encounter, then creating images for future children born by the mother. The image was replaced with I Mage, all done by dark magicians to impose their I Mage upon us. And then I asked you to ponder on this thought in relation to the baptism, the first image. What if the baptism is overlaying the image by pouring water over the baby's head? Remember, water is reflective and so has the ability to mirror an image over us. Education and the bridegroom touched upon how the potential new partners engaged, all under the watchful and supportive eyes of both sets of parents. Now the Slavs brought up children in a special system. The girl was told a boy is a future man, a future warrior, a master, the head of the family, the father of the family, and the children, and the God protector of the family. And therefore he must be loved, respected, and revered as God. Not the God, a God, big difference. And the girl was brought up in this vein. The boys were told a girl is a future woman, future mother, a mistress, a goddess, guardian of the hearth, or hearth, a future larder, mother of God. Therefore, she must be loved, respected, and revered as a goddess, and the children have perceived this since childhood. The next part tipped many of you upside the head, as the realizations of your sexual encounters without this knowledge brought collective gulps. It was called the image of the spirit and blood, which I will read the full piece out as it is important to remember. Rewarding his wife with his image of spirit and blood, given the energy of 1 year of his life, he also gave her the gift of motherhood. For the main goal was to have children and continuing the lineage. A man perceived his wife as the mother of his children, but if he did not see this image in his spouse, the child was born unwanted. This meant the mother of the child was not endowed with the gift of motherhood. She did not feel maternal love, care or affection for the child. And that is an important point that has been lost, the internal damage to a child born out of love. Because if they or one of them doesn't have their affection for the other, the child knows through the mother, and that impacts their living time. And maybe that is why so many of us have low self-worth. The man of the bride, he evaluated not just her appearance, but firstly of all, subconsciously, he thought about whether she was worthy of being the mother of his children. In addition to the fact that she would be Lada, his wife, he also saw her as the mother of his children. And I asked for a deep pondering with that section based on one saying, "We will make man in our image." And the implications of that pondering is enormous. And then we said, did you know there's a difference between a man and a male, plus woman and female? Did you know that when you got up in the morning and you knew that you had to do this and that, a woman on a subconscious level can know everything that she needs to do. But a man must awaken his memory. If he didn't wake me up, what kind of man is he? This is a male. A woman in whom the female lot has not awakened is no longer a woman, but a female. And here they are, males and females having sex. But love can only be in a man and a woman. And this is where the whole relationship issue falls down, in my opinion, because we haven't defined it too well. There is a difference at the outset between love and sex, and yet the lines between them have blurred. And in general, the woman feels there must be love before sex with a partner, whereas the male wants to spread his seed, whether driven by lust or otherwise. But in my opinion, there are 4 components to a relationship, and yet it is never conveyed in that way, is it? Because the male and female aspect, not the man and the woman aspect, kicks in, and we danced around each other playing mind games of cat and mouse. What is wrong if single people can say what they really desire and not overcomplicate things? And I asked you all to ponder on this longer than a snap judgment, because the programs are designed to create such judgments and think on how much easier life would be for single people if everyone was just honest with each other. And I said this should not be a spontaneous engagement, only after at least getting to know each other should this type of discourse take place. I would like the following. Relationship 1, engagement of sex acts between the two and no strings attached. Relationship 2, engagement of sex acts and see how we get along with the possibility of becoming a couple. Relationship 3, I want to make a partner with you and I would like to engage you in sex acts now, or I'm prepared to wait for it. And relationship 4, I wish not to be a couple or have sex with you, but would desire your friendship. No guessing games, no mind games, no lying to each other, just a straight and honest discourse between 2 single people. No wasting energy trying to engage the person, and no roller coaster rides of emotions. Will he or she, or won't he or she? It also encourages people to be more forthright instead of hiding behind nuances. And this then gives everyone more confidence within themselves, which then aids the community and a wider field. This also aids the fear program as well over time, as no longer will people have the fear of being rejected as this discourse becomes the new way. But imagine how many lost opportunities you have had because the fear of being rejected took over. The placing of other people above you based upon looks, earnings, societal status, religion and other comparative measures, all of which ended up with you being the bridesmaid and never the bride, or being the best man and never the groom. And the next part spoke of the energy exchange of the sex act, something we have all overlooked and left all of us with hooks, cords and ex-partners living rent-free in our heads and deciding our future happiness or love. A woman receives from a man the energy of summer or a year of life, and this energy in her activates certain forces. A woman radiating this force to a man opens in him a channel for receiving energy from the lineage. That is, not only a man gives a woman the energy of life, but a woman also gives a man open channels of communication with the cosmos in him, from where he receives additional energy. Therefore, they say a man makes a girl a woman and a woman makes a boy a man, and everything is interconnected. Plus, when a child is born, in the process of communicating with the father, he opens additional channels in a dad, and dad receives more energy from the cosmos. That is, the father does not receive energy from the child, but from the cosmos, because the man himself is a radiating system. He radiates. A woman accumulates and accumulates, as if absorbs. The birth of a child was next, and the benefits to the woman from it. Also, how the birth should always be done in a bathtub filled with water. The next part was about treason of the man or woman straying in their marriage and the consequences of it. More so for the woman, particularly if she had mixed race partners, as the image of the first man overlays the father of the child, particularly if one of the partners has not conceived the child in love. In parental responsibility, it spoke of the first man in the life of a virgin leaves his image, a psychological and often physical portrait of the unborn child that she will give birth to. The health and usefulness of the unborn child depends on the first man. The sexual revolution gave several warnings of the difference between sex and love. Children born in non-loving relationships leads to dysfunctional children, and we have all seen the rise of that since the feminist movement. Our ancestors knew that a girl's body was prepared for flourishing at the age of 16, and from the age of 16 she could get married. A young man could become a husband at the age of 21 because before starting a family he must master weapons and learn how to protect the family. Plus the fact it takes us men a little bit longer to mature than women, I might add. Now, in the West, it has become the norm that children at the age of 10 to 13 are familiar with sex, all whilst 90% of the people of colour have blood diseases. It then spoke about the raising the children until 12, at which point presumably puberty kicked in and the child is expected to be more personally responsible and adult-like. how the children were familiar with nakedness, even with their parents, and it was more comfortable and natural for the children to understand the difference in the body shapes. Of how Christianization was a genetic experiment was the next to be covered with this line. They carry out the rite of baptism, which destroys the energy connection with the parents, relieving them of all responsibility, to then create a new connection between the child and the priest or the Cohen, operating as a Christian god. And I said, I bet that statement raised a few eyebrows and angst due to the lack of knowledge again. Rita and genetic laws were next, and all about the responsibility of the parents of raising other people's children, and it spoke to and about the community spirit within the clan. The next was about how the youngest son was always the heir to the estate, and if no youngest son, it goes to the husband of the youngest daughter, with the family having adopted the husband as a son. Living for the parents or clan spoke of duty, honour and responsibility to work for the all, not the self, and how selfish people operating for the self only are harvesters in essence. A child up to 1 year old was next, and it revealed how more advanced children are at that age, able to see entities and spirits, and yet denied existence by parents who are largely oblivious. It spoke of not showing the baby in company outside of the immediate family for 3 to 12 months to ward off potential viruses. A married woman is only kissed by her husband and some relatives, whilst a man should never kiss or even shake hands with another woman, as it carries their energy. It spoke of energy not easily washed off, and the process of personal hygiene was discussed. And the next was a series of interesting questions and some interesting answers. If a woman had several men, is the child obtained from one or more, was the question. Well, the main image is from the first, and the images of others are superimposed on it. Can non-traditional sexual intercourse affect health and spectrum spiritually? What are non-traditional sex acts was the answer. A married couple does not have such. In what case does a woman not receive the woman's share and the gift of motherhood? If the first man did not see her as the mother of his children, but saw her only as an object of satisfying his sexual needs. That is, he did not see her as a future mother, and therefore did not reveal a woman in her. And therefore she suffers. But then he will understand what needs to be revealed. He may try to do it, but it is much more difficult to do, although it is possible. But it will take more strength, and it would take many years. If a man married a divorced woman, does this mean that each sexual intercourse he will spend one summer of his life? That is correct if he does not change the image of the spirit and blood of her first man by the power of his love. Then he will give her the energy of the year of his life every time. And these are the laws of the universe. Only mutual love can change the image. If the wedding was conducted by a monk in a monastery with the permission of Vladika, what will happen to this marriage? The answer was, a good thing will not be called a marriage. That is, if the Slavs came to get married in the Christian church, This will be a marriage for the glory of Israel. The priest says, for the glory of Israel I crown, and not for the glory of Russia or the Slavic family. And the Rus clearly understand the higher purpose of two people coming together. The next question was, can all people love? The answer was, everyone can, but not everyone does it. And it said you can compare it with the sun, as everyone can receive light from the sun, but someone who lives in caves and does not come out of there will not. And this has a much wider part to play, and it goes back to our piece. What is love? Do we understand it? No. Have we defined it? No. Are we embracing it? No. Do we run from it? Yes. Why? Because of fear. And fear is a low vibrational state, which means you cannot experience love, which is a higher vibrational state and is essential if you're going to rise the golden path. Those in fear will run from love, make excuses to not accommodate it, and ultimately end up discommunicated and disconnected from source due to their own fears. The light from the sun comes with love. The avoidance of the sun operates in darkness and fear. A fairly comprehensive and thought-pondering show to wrap up the last of the must-listen-to shows over this year. Final piece tonight. A fairly packed year for must-listen-to shows, despite there being less shows this year in that category. We had 8 must-listen-to shows this year, packed with a variety of topics, pondering and deeper dot connections. The less must-listen-to shows was largely down to the blueprint, which received and aired its final draft in March and April of this year. And 3 epic read-out shows, including some of our members reading out their own individual solutions, which then launched the Blueprint groups and developed into Blueprint-only shows, which stands at 12 episodes to date. We did 32 normal shows this year, which was a change from all other years, as generally there was 52 episodes. But that too was affected by the Blueprint, and I also took some time off this year, which was technically not time off, only some time off from the shows, as my trips were of a working variety, as well as we will find out in another review. The Tiny Show series also had to take a back seat, and also the now legendary Empowerment Show, which has almost been 2 years in the making. But then there are many empowerment pieces in each show now. The shows have morphed from intense sin eating to our show and narrative being proven on a large scale. Plus the added bonus of seeing many programs being exposed and crashing this year. And we have to shift many pieces or sections of the show around this year, as what was in the society news section in the past that covered the programs being ran on us was now becoming the news. But with the convergence unfolding now, all is being blurred into one. The programs we highlighted in the past are being thrust into the now and now being covered in mainstream media. And that is evidence of planting the seeds working. For those who may be impatient on the feedback of the Blueprint, should take stock of how things unfold in a flow. Society news is now the news, Our book is now the From His Story to Our Story section. Our book is now the expose section. The mystery section is now becoming mainstream as well. One past member warned us 2 years ago that THI was becoming the news, and that has been borne out this year in many fields. The expose series on COVID, done mostly 3 years ago now, became breaking news and world exclusives as advertised by other alt media. And the From His Story to Our Story book, whilst not directly referenced, reared its head in 2 spectacular ways this year. One, the US Congress discussed in a hearing about the Jews wanting to exterminate the whites. A fairly extraordinary claim outside of THI. Inside THI, we knew all about it due to the volume of evidence within the series and now our books. And then a UN meeting took place, and the topic of discussion was, are the Jews Khazarians, and did the Jews come from East Asia, not the Middle East as they state? Again, a fairly extraordinary claim that was stated within our series and books. And who would have thought those 2 very contentious and controversial topics would be heard at their meetings? And the impact of THI not only on the news but the collective consciousness and algorithms has been a source of pride for many of our members this year. 2 Cliff High episodes early in the year confirmed the algorithm impacts, although Cliff High went to Cliff Low later in the year. But Cliff's whole show is based solely upon the CIA algorithm database, and his reports were riddled with THI themes and also memes. Now, algorithms are based on what words, groups or people are having an impact, and Cliff High certainly confirmed THI's role within it. July this year brought 2 events for THI. The first was my 10th year anniversary mentioned earlier, and a fun time was had by all, including my mother. The second one was more of a personal download that tasked me to go deeper in my thinking, pondering and wisdom database. This has since been borne out within the shows as the narrative shifted largely to us of how to be, act, love and engage. And all of you have gotten much out of that, and in essence it brought forward, due to the increased frequencies surrounding that, the current episodes of all things Rus, Aryan, Slavs, Ers, Santis and the Vaders. Saddest piece of the year? The passing of Angela Efkin, but she is now back with Glenn Connon. Well, words of the year: out of the mind and into the heart. Love, not fear. Anyone can be intelligent, but not all go on to wisdom. People focus on the effect, but never the cause. And hope is the avenue of the light. Funny words of the year: tough titties, turn it in, pull the other one, it's got balls on, trust science, I would sooner set fire to my own testicles, who me, and the classic, is he human? Members ass kicking must listen to show of the year, the THI Book of Revelations. The biggest piece of the year in THI shows, the love piece on November 30th show. The biggest impact shows in terms of understanding frequency and deeper triggering, From His Story to Our Story, plus 22 and 23. Songs of the year: Ode to Freedom, follow your heart, return to love, hero of the day, one world, and love me like you do. A curious and interesting observation of mine I have watched unfold with alarming regularity within the Zoom calls, MeWe chats and discussions within the village. One member in the village stopped and recognised it, of how much their language and discourse has changed. The way they speak, how they speak, and gone are the platitudes and cliches provided by the media, and in comes THI speak and code. Barely a sentence goes by now without referencing the extensive memes that have come out of this show, sometimes in multiples, and it is fun to see and hear. With so many meme sentences created for and by us, is in overview a rewriting of the spellcasting they did on us. And we have developed our own language in essence, one that talks in higher tongues and common sense. And you do realise the more this takes off and holds, we are counteracting their AI systems. Out with their spellcasting tags, labels and boxes, and in with common sense memes. Out with their mind memes and in with heart-centered memes that have an impact. If it doesn't make sense, it is a program is one of them. Theirs never made sense. Ours does. Clowns is being used throughout the alt and mainstream media now. And I'm sure you all have your own personal favourites. And this is an example of changing things without noticing it. It is a subtle 180 away from their control over our words. Embrace it and expand it, I say, as that change in language and delivery will be the way forward. Tighter bonds have been formed now, and that is all it requires. Togetherness. And it is important you all take what you learned this year and carry it forward into next year. What they do now is becoming not only embarrassing, but entirely irrelevant on a wider picture scale. What we do now is what counts and will be counted, albeit the few. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.